Hi Jason, it's good to see you again. Now, most InvestorStream subscribers know you as the Chief Executive of Trip Therapeutics, the clinical stage biotech making key advancements in the field of precision psychedelics. But what they may not know is that you're also one of the largest shareholders in another ASX biotech, Island Pharmaceuticals, which specialises in unique clinically backed solutions for the treatment of dengue fever. So turning from the C-suite to the buy side, can you just tell us what attracted you to Island as an investment proposition?
So I guess from an investment perspective, I actually don't often invest in pharmaceutical and biotech stocks. It's kind of not that I don't want to. I find it extremely difficult to attribute value to pre-revenue companies with a potential molecules. Since I had over 4 years at my time at J&J in licensing and acquisition, I probably assessed more than 500 companies or products in that time, as well as the company's leadership, how they spend money, and most importantly, what products do they have? What's their future look like? When you follow such a regimented sort of process to assign a pipeline with a value based on the probability of technical and regulatory success, on average, you would do a license or an acquisition maybe 1% of the time. So 5 or 6 companies out of that 500. That really isn't very many. So I try and do the same with any personal investments that I make. And so throughout that assessment and sort of diligence process, you always keep sort of finding things that are hidden away. You might find dysfunctional leadership, really hefty salaries and bonuses that don't really have the market cap, the activity or the growth to support those sort of costs. So there are always trade-offs in anything that you do. But when I first decided to invest in Island, which was just over 3 years ago, I actually saw a really lean company with a smart and thoughtful CEO. People don't often think that thoughtful is important. I actually think it's really important. I spend a lot of time digging into the history of ILA 101, but in the end, look, after all that looking through, it actually came down to one small preclinical rat study for me. As a science person, that's all I want to see data, and that data was very convincing. It actually showed that given a lethal dose of dengue, where all of the control rats were rats, but they all died within 5 days. But ILA 101 treated rats showed a proportional and a dose-dependent virucidal response. With just one dose of ILA 101, 30% of the rats survived. With 2 doses, 70% survived. So when you get that sort of dose-dependent, dose-related response of any product that shows a virucidal or prospect for a company, you get really excited about it. And that really came down to the reasons why I invested in Island in the first place.
Thanks, Jason. Now, as you mentioned there, before taking the reins at Trip, you've had a fairly decorated 30-year career in the healthcare sector, which included high-profile roles at global pharma giant Johnson & Johnson. That experience gives you a unique vantage point into the global regulatory standards that international healthcare companies must comply with. So, taking all that into account, what stands out about the way Island is advancing its clinical trial program and the work carried out to date?
I certainly realise, and then being in charge of a small ASX-listed biotech myself, it's extremely difficult for small pharma to be heard above the noise from big pharma. All you can really do is do your best to raise the profile of your company that you believe in as best you can. And unfortunately, most CEOs, I think, fail at this. The CEO role should never really be considered as just a job. I mean, you're the custodian of a shareholder's investment. So if you're doing that and spending money like it's your own, people will have more respect for you. And what I like about David Foster, Island CEO, is that, look, he's an extremely honourable, honest leader that does his absolute best every day for Island shareholders. And I know I was an observer on the board a couple of times throughout the last few years, and I know how hard he works to make sure he brings the results for his shareholders. The clinical program no one could ever classify it as like a flashy program, but it didn't need to be, because David spent such a considerable amount of time collaborating with the US military. Not only did the US military provide a grant to Island of over $1 million, they also gave the Island team full access to their attenuated dengue virus and all of the research they had about what happens when a patient or subject is receiving this virus. So that all that research was given to Island Pharma because they had that relationship and they asked. So I don't know of any other company I can think of that's managed to engage with stakeholders to that extent. So what this means is that you don't need to do a large population study that is incredibly hit and miss when you have the ability to challenge subjects with the actual virus you want to protect the population with. The beauty of what David has done and the Island team actually have done is that as investors, we're actually going to know definitively whether or not ILA 101 helps to prevent or reduce the symptoms of dengue fever. This is such a simple outcome and such a simple request, but it's one that has actually led to tens of millions of dollars being spent by large pharmaceutical companies on very significant population-based clinical programs, predominantly in developing countries. And I have to say, because I've been in a number of developing countries, some of which should never have been done. In this respect, I think Ireland is actually achieving something that Big Pharma could never have done. And I think that's something we should all be proud of and we should all invest in.
And just finally, Jason, coming back to your experience with large pharma, what do you think the potential of ILA 101 may be, provided it meets all required regulatory hurdles in the future?
Yeah, maybe I'm a little biased. I mean, I am a shareholder, so that obviously has been stated. But before I moved back to Australia at the end of 2023, I'd spent the previous 12 years working in the Philippines and in Vietnam. Dengue fever casts one of the longest shadows over those countries and its populations. Just as an example, I actually donated blood on 3 separate occasions to support employees they had at the time. One of their children had contracted dengue and required a blood transfusion. Blood is not always easy to get, especially if they have a certain blood type. So I put my hand up and said, okay, let's do it. But when you get that kind of fear in people, and it causes so much heartache for so many, 10,000 deaths every year around the world, that can be or may be prevented or significantly reduced. I think a treatment that can help dengue or can actually reduce the signs and symptoms of dengue would be used across all of the hospitals I used to visit with J&J in those 2 markets. And in the developing as well as the developed world, where dengue is a feared disease, for at least 4 to 6 months of the year, I invested in Ireland because I see it as being a significant product and help a lot of people. And I see it as a significant value accretive company. I would not think for a moment that the products that Ireland currently has, Galdeservir and ILA 101, has the potential of selling $1 billion a year. That's what I think of Ireland. And that's why I've been invested for 3 years and I am still investing.
Fantastic. Well, that wraps our interview, Jason. Thanks so much for taking the time in what's a busy schedule. Our audience loves to learn about how sophisticated investors make their decisions in allocating capital. So I really appreciate the insights and look forward to chatting again soon.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.